We are covering this evolving news that Kevin Durant has asked to be traded out of Brooklyn, and this is how it all happened. Our Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that Phoenix and Miami, they're among the teams that Kevin Durant has on his wish list. Of course, it needs to be mutual. You can see the details there. 4 years left on his contract. No shortage of teams willing to trade for him. And then, more according to our Woj, Kevin Durant and Kyrie, they did not have contact with the franchise after Irving opted into his deal on Monday, and there was a sense of inevitability that existed that Durant would eventually ask for a trade. Then that trade request was made directly to the Nets owner, Joe Tsai. That was earlier today. So that's how we got in the room where it happened. This is where we stand now, bringing back in our front office insider, Bobby Marks, and senior writer and reporter, Brian Windhorst. And Brian, I want to start with you here because one of the dominoes of Kevin Durant is Kyrie Irving. Where could he end up?
About seeing you in the fall. I would say that's not going to be happening now. I would say that Kevin Durant leaving also means Kyrie Irving will be leaving, if not sooner. So as I've talked to league executives over the last couple of hours, they believe that the price for Kyrie Irving is going down, down, down. Because before, when the Nets were considering trades, they had to consider keeping the team at a certain level with Durant. Now that Durant is very likely going to be off the team, the price for Kyrie Irving, especially in a rental situation, where he's only going to be likely with this team possibly for only 1 year, is going to drop. And that is going to open up more opportunities than we saw even a couple of days ago when teams weren't interested in paying the price for him. So from what I am told, definitely look for the Los Angeles Lakers. They were interested when he was going to potentially be a free agent.
Yep.
They would be interested now. The only trade that makes sense, really, unfortunately, is for Russell Westbrook. And that trade would add $11 million to the Nets payroll and potentially cause other issues. And that would potentially mean that the Lakers would have to incentivize the trade with draft picks, which may be a challenge. But I've also been told to keep an eye on the LA Clippers. Now, I know that they just signed John Wall and that they look like they're set at the point guard position. But it's possible that the price would potentially be so low that the Clippers would have to at least revisit the concept. Ty Lue was Kyrie's coach in Cleveland. They left on bad terms, but I have been told that that is no longer considered an issue. I would think it's probably a long shot that the Clippers would want to do that, but I have been told to take an eye on it. Also, I've been told that the Dallas Mavericks may kick the tires on this deal. Now, I know that the Dallas may not come out and say that, but I have been told that that is something they will at least kick. Now, these are teams that were on Kyrie's quote-unquote list that Woj reported earlier this week that he would want to go to. Dallas, remember, is now losing Jalen Brunson. Dallas is in a talent loss that they need to put next to Luka Doncic. But I think there's going to be a little bit more teams sniffing around Kyrie because I really think if you think Kevin Durant's not going to go for value, just wait till you see what Kevin Durant may leave Brooklyn on in the next few days.
Yeah, it's going to be monumental. What other words can I use? Because this is something that we just have not seen before. Brian Windhorst, thank you so much. Some of the teams that Brian mentioned for Kyrie Irving, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Dallas Mavericks. We know that Texas doesn't have the same sort of mandates that New York had. Zach, what do you see here?
I've been told, my intel consistently has been, and again, this could all change as the price comes down, as Brian said, that the Clippers are not going to be interested in upending their team for Kyrie Irving. That could always change if one of the more powerful people of there changes his mind, but that's what I've heard consistently. Dallas, I've heard consistently, is not going to upend its team to trade for Kyrie Irving. Now, they did just lose Jalen Brunson. Does that change things? Maybe. I would bet no, but we'll see. The Knicks, they just got Jalen Brunson, so are they going to upend their team now to get Kyrie Irving? Who, remember, that was their dream, was Kyrie and KD. They did all this stuff to get flexibility. They traded picks. They just got Jalen Brunson. They just got a point guard. So I keep going back to the Lakers trade, and now that my team is blowing up, if I'm Brooklyn, I'm less concerned about fit this season, all that. If I can get Russ and I can get 2 unprotected or lightly protected Lakers picks, I might do that. Like, fit this season, who cares? Give me those picks.
What do you think?
You know what's interesting about this is that now, because of the way this is playing out, actually the market for Kyrie Irving is actually broader than it is for Kevin Durant because there are only a very select situations that are going to make Kevin Durant happy, which is going to be important in this, and that you're going to have the assets in terms of young players that are on the level they need to be or going to be there in the near future plus picks. You're talking about only a couple of teams that are even going to come into that category. For Kyrie Irving, actually, there's probably a lot more teams that may be able to get into this because of what they just said. It's not going to take as much to get him as it would have, and there are going to be teams that could consider the expiring contract situation with him, and he goes into free agency next summer, which I was just saying to Perk during the last break. You realize if Kyrie Irving gets traded this year, goes into free agency next summer, signs with another team, that'll be his 5th team in 6 years? Woo! For a guy that we all talk about being one of the greatest offensive players this league has seen, 5 teams in 6 years, if it plays out that way, and I think that's actually possible.
But that's not all we talk about when it comes to Kyrie.
That's true.
That's not all we talk about when it comes to Kyrie. Look, when I look at the possible destinations, and look, the Lakers, no one has mentioned, and again, we're throwing out everybody's name. AD for Kevin Durant. I think to me that sounds for Durant. Now I also when I look at Kyrie. Now Kyrie's talking about wanting to go to LA. That's been the rumor mill and all this other stuff. And you're right, Russell Westbrook. And if you can just kind of swap that and just say, hey, we want to move on, then you take on that contract and you get some picks. Because if you're talking about a buyout, like we talked about there, because we don't believe he's going to be in a Brooklyn Nets uniform next year. So you're talking about a buyout, so you're just going to cost money for nothing. Look, say what you want about Russ. Russ shows up every day to work.
Sure does.
Absolutely.
Russ shows up every single day. You don't question his effort. You don't question his durability. You might question his shot selection. You might question some other things, but you don't question his availability. You don't question him showing up.
An Iron Man.
He's an Iron Man, and so when you look at this, I could see Kyrie. I could see Kyrie getting to LA sooner than people think, if that's what the Nets do. Because I think a lot of places, Kyrie, we make it seem like Kyrie just going to want to show up someplace and like, hey, we're sending you to Oklahoma City for some picks, and they're going to, then he's going to get bought out and he's going to go to LA. So it's like, I think Kyrie Irving, high probability, ends the season in LA.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. We all speculate that Kyrie could possibly end up in LA, but guess who else could end up in LA? Kevin Durant. And here's why I feel this way, right? When you look at the Clippers and you look at Kawhi Leonard, I want you to go back before Kawhi Leonard signed with the Clippers. He was on the phone begging Kevin Durant to pair up with him and go join the L.A. Clippers before he got on the phone and somewhat went behind Russ back and told Paul George to leave and asked to be traded to go to the Clippers. So I wouldn't.
How do you go behind Russ's back?
Because, man, you know what I'm saying? There was some conversations being held.
We don't got to get into it, but I'm just how do you go behind Russ's back to talk to another man about what he wants?
Because they was already in conversations with one another before he went to Paul George. He was in conversations with Russ. That's another story. Anyway, what I'm saying is be on the lookout possibly for a Paul George KD swap. Listen, I'm not putting anything past Kawhi Leonard when it comes down to him trying to win and him trying to think about himself and what he could do for an organization. And we are talking about Kevin Durant here.
Okay, so there's a whole lot there. And yes, it does start and kind of end in a lot of ways with Kevin Durant. I want to bring Brian Windhorst, though, back into the conversation. He has more. Hey, Brian.
Richard is dancing around this, and we don't 100% know exactly. We know where KD is with the Nets. That is now over. We don't 100% know where KD is with Kyrie Irving. The league doesn't know. But it has been floated to me by executives that I'm so much loath to say it.
I can't.
Don't
that
do
if
it.
they were be kept together, that the Lakers would potentially have a package that you could trade for both of them.
Let's go,
Richard.
But we don't know. It's too fragile. It's too fragile because we just don't know where KD and Kyrie are if they're still interested in together. But it would take, after seeing what happened when they were together, almost no team with options would do it. But the Lakers don't have options. So that's the only place I heard it was possible. But
Russ,
we don't have enough. We don't really have enough information to know.
Oh,
can we do?
I asked the question earlier. I asked the question
I
earlier.
will retire.
Okay.
From this show,
Please.
If KD and Kyrie and Bron are in LA, I'll retire.
And what you gonna do?
I really. Are you going to suit up?
I'm going to go referee.
Oh, God. All right, I need to bring the adult back into the room.
I'm going to go referee.
I really do.
Technical, you're all out of here, everybody.
Bobby Marks, Lord help us. Please outline something that's realistic that we could see here.
Well, that's not realistic.
Richard, refereeing?
I don't think Sean Marks would answer the phone, guys. Come on.
That's
He's
what I
not
heard.
answering
He's
the
not
phone for
answering the
Russell
phone.
Westbrook and Anthony Davis here. I think certainly, how about Kyrie to the crosstown Clippers, right? Does that make sense? Certainly not Kawhi Leonard or Paul George, but when you look at all these sweet spot contracts, I think the big question is going to be with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving is what is going to be the appetite with Irving and taking back long-term contracts in Brooklyn. If Brooklyn's all about kind of rebuilding young players, I'm not sure the Clippers kind of fit the bill here as far as with their contract. The other thing that's interesting with Kyrie, he's got a trade bonus in his contract, right? $5.5 million. So if Brooklyn trades him, they owe him $5.5 million in any deal.
Huh. If I get traded, do you owe me $5.5 million?
Why do you think I tried to retire? I have a retirement kicker. I'm going to start collecting my NBA pins.
Bobby Marks, thank you so much for that insight. Okay, so if Richard is signing up for refereeing if Kyrie goes to the Lakers, would you sign up for refereeing if he goes to the Clippers?
I would be a professional sport fisherman, I think is what I would do, Rich.
I think
Just be on a boat all day, right? I'm with you, though. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see it. I don't want to have to talk about it.
I want to see it.
I don't want to have to talk about that.
I want all the drama. Like
I don't want that.
Like what else are we going to talk about?
It's not going to happen.
We talked about
It's not going to happen.
We talked about the Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets, probably our top three teams that we talked about. And both those teams were subpar at best. Why not pair them all together? See what kind of nonsense can happen there.
We have drifted off the road of reality now. Talking about that's not going to happen.
We have drifted off the road of reality. Let's go back to reality a little bit, Zach. I want to bring in our reporter covering the Brooklyn Nets, Nick Friedel. I'm curious, Nick. We have spent for the last several hours discussing Kevin Durant. The crux of this why is so interesting to me. How much are the Nets putting all of these dominoes that we're seeing on Kyrie Irving?
Malika, top to bottom, the organization knows that almost all of it lies at Kyrie's feet because his decision not to get vaccinated early in the year was a huge albatross on everything. And then everything he did from the time he came back was a constant headache. And Lake just said we're getting off the topic of reality. When you're talking about Kyrie, he lives in his own world. And the Nets knew that, but they thought they could put him in a situation where he could get enough support and his teammates and everybody else would be behind him. And Malika, publicly, pretty much everybody stood behind him. But Sean Marks, in that press conference at the end of the season, spoke for a lot of people in that organization when he said, we want people who want to be here. And the Nets couldn't trust that Kyrie was going to be out there night after night after night. And Stephen A. hit it right on the head a little while ago talking to you guys. He said that all the issues festered and all that drama overwhelmed this team. I've been covering the league for about 15 years now. I have never seen a team that unhappy with so many different things going on in the last 4 or 5 months of the season. And it broke them because let's go back to the beginning. James Harden would still be on the Nets if Kyrie had gotten that shot. He would still be here. They wouldn't have the turmoil that they had. They would have done much better in the playoffs if he had been there throughout the year. Yes, injuries played a role, but Kyrie Irving is the reason for a lot of people in that organization that the Nets are in the situation they're in right now.
Nick Friedel, thank you so much for that insight. Tim Legler, if you were in the Nets locker room, how are you parsing this apart? If you're one of the guys who is seeing on their phone, oh my gosh, Kevin Durant has requested a trade, where do you lay this?
The number one guy I'd love to right now just be a fly on the wall. Tell me you wouldn't want to be a fly on the wall in Ben Simmons' house.
No, ever, under any
No, just right now. Just think.
Not I said the fly.
Look at what you said earlier. Because he actually was going to go to a place where all of the things he does well that we talk about were actually going to have a lot of value, right? And his weaknesses would be hidden by those two guys. Now, he has no idea who he's playing with. And he's the one guy that's been an all-star that could be left there. And you say, well, what are we if Ben Simmons – now, not to say he will be their best player, depending on what they get back for Kevin Durant, but everything changes now in terms of what Ben Simmons' expectations are. So that locker room was a disaster all year. It continues to be. And, until this stuff sorts itself out and we see what their team's going to look like, you can't really even evaluate what the Nets' prospects are for next season.
Yeah, there's a whole lot going on.
Yeah, so we've been up here for hours. So I've just been tweeting.
Well, you've been up here
Are you
for
still tweeting?
not.
You're tweeting from here?
I'm tweeting for right now. I just tweeted at a guy, I hate
gosh.
Sean. They're Knicks fans. Knicks fans are not happy with me. And they're like, Richard's being so nice to the Nets. I'm like, no, I understand this situation is trash, but you know what they're not? They're not the Knicks. Like,
Okay,
so
no,
it's like-
stop.
so that's
The
what
Knicks
they're
just
not.
got Jalen Brunson. Let the Knicks fans be happy.
That's what I actually tweeted. I was like, yo, I actually like Jalen Brunson. Congratulate him. But I was like, outside of that, there's not been a lot of things that we can, talk about in a positive manner. But look,
All right.
Knicks fans, I'm sorry. You want me to be meaner to the Nets? I understand. Like, I get it. I apologize. Nets, you guys.